The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the trading post in Wallace, New Mexico territory. And when the door opened, William Walker saw something that made him pause mid-step with the water bucket still in his hand. A young woman descended with terror written across every feature of her pale face, her green eyes darting around like a cornered animal searching for escape routes that did not exist. It was late August in 1878, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street of Wallace, a town that existed primarily to serve the nearby cattle ranches and the occasional traveler brave enough to venture through this harsh landscape. William had seen plenty of travelers arrive over the years since he had taken over his father's ranch at 23, but none had ever looked quite as frightened as this particular woman who now stood clutching a worn carpetbag with white-knuckled hands. She could not have been more than 21 or 22, William guessed, watching as she stumbled slightly on the last step down from the coach. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins during the journey, and her simple gray traveling dress was covered in trail dust. But it was her eyes that held his attention, those wide, terrified green eyes that kept scanning the street as though expecting some monster to emerge from behind every building. "You getting that water to the horses, or you planning to stand there gawking all day?" His ranch hand, old Pete Martinez, called out from the stable doorway. William shook himself and continued toward the water trough, but he could not stop glancing back at the young woman. She had not moved from her spot beside the stagecoach, even though the driver had already tossed down her trunk and was preparing to continue on to Santa Fe. The other passengers had dispersed, heading toward the hotel or the saloon, but she remained frozen in place. "Miss, you need to collect your belongings," the driver said, not unkindly. "We are pulling out in 5 minutes." She flinched at his words, and William saw her grip tighten on the carpetbag. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. The driver shrugged and climbed back up to his seat, clearly washing his hands of the situation. William set down the water bucket and found his feet carrying him across the dusty street before his mind had fully decided to intervene. As he approached, the woman's eyes locked onto him, and he saw her entire body tense as though preparing to flee. "Easy there," he said softly, stopping a good 6 feet away and holding his hands where she could see them, palms open and empty. "I do not mean you any harm. My name is William Walker. I own the ranch just north of town. You look like you could use some help." She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see the internal battle playing out across her expressive face, the desperate need for assistance warring with what appeared to be deep-seated fear of trusting anyone. Finally, she swallowed hard and managed to speak in a voice barely above a whisper. "I am Amelia Morrison. I do not know where to go." Her accent marked her as educated, probably from back east, and William wondered what circumstances had brought such a refined young woman to this rough corner of the territory. More importantly, he wondered what had put that bone-deep terror in her eyes. "The hotel is just there," he said, nodding toward the 2-story building across the street. "Mrs. Chen runs a clean establishment. You can get a room and a hot meal." Amelia's eyes followed his gesture, but she shook her head quickly. "I have very little money. I cannot afford." "That is, I need to find work immediately." "What kind of work are you looking for?" She took a shaky breath. "Anything. I can cook, clean, do laundry, mend clothes. I was a governess back in Boston, so I can teach reading and arithmetic to children. I will do whatever honest work is available." William considered this. His ranch house was certainly large enough to warrant household help, and his cooking left much to be desired. But more than that, something in her desperation called to a protective instinct he had not realized he possessed. "I could use someone to manage my household," he said carefully, watching her reaction. "The job comes with room and board plus wages. Nothing improper, you understand. You would have your own quarters in the main house, completely separate. I am out working the ranch most days from before dawn until after dark. Mainly, I need someone to keep the place from falling apart and make sure I eat something besides beans and hardtack." Hope flickered in those green eyes for just a moment before suspicion clouded them again. Why would you offer work to a stranger? It was a fair question, and William respected her for asking it despite her obvious desperation. "Because you look like someone who needs a safe place, and I happen to have one. And because my mother, God rest her soul, would rise from her grave and haunt me if I left a lady stranded in the street." The smallest hint of a smile tugged at the corner of Amelia's mouth, gone almost before it appeared. I accept. Thank you, Mr. Walker. William, please. Let me get your trunk." He hoisted the heavy trunk onto his shoulder with practiced ease, and gestured for her to follow him toward where his wagon stood hitched in front of the mercantile. Amelia walked beside him, still clutching that carpet bag as though her life depended on it, her eyes continuing to scan every doorway and window they passed. Old Pete appeared with the horses, freshly watered, and raised his eyebrows at the sight of Amelia. "We got company, boss." "Pete, this is Miss Morrison. She will be managing the household from now on. Miss Morrison, Pete Martinez has worked our ranch since before I was born. He knows more about cattle and horses than any 10 men combined." Pete removed his hat and gave a respectful nod. "Welcome, miss. It will be good to have some proper cooking again. William here could burn water if we let him." This earned another fleeting smile from Amelia, and William felt an unexpected warmth in his chest at the sight. He helped her up onto the wagon seat and secured her trunk in the back, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. The ride out to the ranch took about 40 minutes, following a well-worn trail that curved along the Rio Grande, before heading north into the rolling grasslands. William kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and explaining the basics of the ranch operations, more to put her at ease than anything else. Amelia said little, but he noticed her death grip on the carpet bag gradually loosening as they left the town behind. The Walker ranch house came into view as they crested a small rise, a sturdy adobe structure with a covered porch that wrapped around 3 sides. His father had built it 20 years earlier, designed to stay cool in the brutal summer heat and retain warmth during the cold winter months. Cottonwood trees that his mother had planted stood tall on either side, providing blessed shade, and the barn and other outbuildings spread out behind the main house in orderly rows. "It is not fancy," William said as he pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house, "but it is solid and safe." Amelia looked at the house for a long moment, and when she turned to him, there were tears in her eyes. "It is perfect." William carried her trunk inside and showed her to the room that had once belonged to his sister before she married and moved to California. It was a comfortable space with a real bed, a chest of drawers, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the vegetable garden his mother had tended and that now grew wild with neglect. "Take your time settling in," he said from the doorway. "There is water in the pitcher and clean linens in the chest. I will be in the kitchen when you are ready." He left her alone and headed to the kitchen, where he stood staring at the cold stove and wondering what he had just gotten himself into. It was not like him to make impulsive decisions, especially ones that involved inviting young women to live in his house. But there had been something about the fear in Amelia's eyes that had struck a chord deep within him. She was running from something, that much was clear. And whatever it was had left her terrified enough to accept work from a complete stranger in a town she had never seen before. 20 minutes later, Amelia appeared in the kitchen doorway. She had washed her face and fixed her hair into a neat bun at the nape of her neck, and some of the trail dust had been brushed from her dress. She looked slightly less terrified and slightly more determined. "Where do you keep your supplies?" she asked. William showed her the pantry, which was reasonably well stocked thanks to his monthly trips to the mercantile, and the root cellar, which contained vegetables and dried meat. She surveyed everything with a critical eye, then nodded to herself and set to work. Within an hour, the kitchen smelled better than it had in the 3 years since his mother's passing. Amelia moved around the space with quiet efficiency, and William found himself inventing excuses to stay nearby, ostensibly mending a bridle but really just watching her transform random ingredients into what promised to be an actual meal. "You said you were a governess in Boston," he ventured after a while. "What brought you all the way out to New Mexico territory?" Her hands stilled for just a moment in their work before resuming their steady rhythm chopping vegetables. "I needed a change of circumstances." It was clearly not the whole truth, but William did not push. She would tell him when she was ready, or she would not. Either way, she deserved her privacy. They ate dinner in the dining room, which William had not used in months, preferring to eat standing up in the kitchen when he bothered to eat at all. The meal, roasted chicken with vegetables and fresh bread she had somehow managed to make, was so good that William had to restrain himself from embarrassing behavior. "This is incredible," he said after his third helping. "If you cook like this all the time, I might never let you leave." The words were meant as a joke, but Amelia's face went pale and her fork clattered to her plate. William mentally kicked himself for his thoughtless comment. "I am sorry," he said quickly. "That came out wrong. What I meant is that you are an excellent cook, and I am grateful you accepted the position. You are free to leave whenever you choose, of course. I would never try to keep anyone against their will." Amelia picked up her fork with a trembling hand. "I apologize for my reaction. I know you meant no harm. Someone hurt you. It was not a question." She looked up at him, and in the lamplight her eyes were bright with unshed tears. For a long moment she said nothing, and William thought she might not answer at all. Then she took a shaky breath. "His name was Richard Sterling. We were engaged to be married. He seemed so charming at first, so attentive. My parents approved of the match. He came from a good family, had money and prospects." She paused, swallowing hard. But after the engagement was announced, things changed. He became possessive, controlling. He would fly into rages over the smallest things. Once, I smiled at a shop clerk, and Richard grabbed my arm so hard he left bruises. He said I belonged to him now, and he would not tolerate me looking at other men. William felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm and steady. "Did you try to break the engagement?" "I tried. My parents would not hear of it. They said I was being dramatic, that all men were a bit jealous, that I should be grateful someone like Richard wanted me." The tears were flowing freely now. The wedding was set for June. 2 weeks before the date, Richard told me he was going to make sure I never looked at another man again. He said that after we were married, he would keep me locked in the house where I belonged. The way he said it, the look in his eyes, I knew he meant it. I knew if I married him, I would never be free again. So I took what money I had saved, bought a ticket on the first westbound stage, and ran. "You did the right thing," William said firmly. "Getting away from a man like that took courage." "Courage?" Amelia laughed bitterly. "I have been terrified every moment since I left Boston. I keep expecting to see Richard around every corner. I keep thinking he will find me and drag me back. When I saw you in the street today, my first thought was that he had somehow sent you to bring me home." "You are safe here," William said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "I give you my word. No one will hurt you while you are under my protection." She studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. "I believe you. I do not know why, but I do." That night, William lay awake in his room thinking about Amelia and the fear that still lurked in her eyes despite her brave front. He thought about the man who had driven her to flee across the country and felt a fierce protectiveness he had no right to feel for a woman he had known less than a day. But there it was, undeniable and strong, the determination that Amelia Morrison would never have to be afraid again, not if he had anything to say about it. The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. William rose before dawn to tend to ranch work, and by the time he returned to the house for breakfast, Amelia would have a hot meal waiting. She threw herself into managing the household with single-minded focus, cleaning rooms that had not seen proper attention in years, mending clothes, tending the neglected garden. William suspected she was trying to prove her worth, to earn her place, as though he might change his mind and send her away if she did not work hard enough. He tried to tell her she did not need to work herself to exhaustion, but she would just give him a tight smile and continue whatever task she had set herself. So instead, he started finding excuses to be around the house more. He would work on mending tack on the back porch, where he could hear her singing softly to herself as she worked in the garden. He would come in from the fields earlier than necessary, drawn by the warm lamplight in the kitchen windows and the knowledge that she would be there. Slowly, incrementally, the fear in Amelia's eyes began to ease. She still startled at loud noises and tensed when he approached too quickly, but she also smiled more often. Real smiles that reached her eyes and transformed her entire face. William found himself working to earn those smiles, telling stories about ranch mishaps or Pete's ongoing feud with a particularly stubborn bull named Goliath. 2 weeks after her arrival, William came in from the south pasture to find Amelia standing on the porch, shading her eyes as she looked toward the setting sun. She had taken to wearing one of his mother's old dresses that she had found in a trunk and altered to fit her slighter frame. The deep blue fabric brought out the green in her eyes, and her hair, freed from its usual severe bun, hung in a long braid over one shoulder. "Beautiful evening," William said, climbing the porch steps. "It is," she agreed, and there was something in her voice that made him look at her more closely. "I was just thinking how different this place is from Boston. There you could hardly see the sky for all the buildings, and the stars. I had forgotten how many stars there were." "Wait until winter," William said, leaning against the porch railing beside her. "On a clear night, it looks like someone spilled diamonds across the sky." They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the clouds in shades of orange and pink. William was acutely aware of how close she was standing, close enough that he could catch the scent of lavender soap and the bread she had been baking. "William," Amelia said softly, and it was the first time she had used his given name without the formal Mr. in front of it. "I want to thank you." "For what?" "For giving me a chance when you had no reason to trust me, for making me feel safe, for not asking questions I was not ready to answer." She turned to face him, and her eyes were clear and steady, "for replacing my fear with something else." "What is it replaced with?" he asked, though he thought he knew, hoped he knew. "Hope," she said simply. "For the first time in longer than I can remember, I have hope that life can be good, that I can be happy, that not all men are like Richard." William reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted to, and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers barely brushed her cheek, but he felt her sharp intake of breath. "I am glad," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. You deserve to be happy, Amelia. You deserve to feel safe, and if you will let me, I would like to be the one who makes sure you always do. William, She trailed off, biting her lip. I am not sure I know how to do this. Richard was my first and only courtship, and it was terrible from the start. I just did not see it. I do not know how to recognize what is real and what is not anymore. Then we will figure it out together, William said. There is no rush. I am not going anywhere, and neither are you unless you want to. We have all the time in the world. She smiled at that, a genuine smile full of warmth that made William's heart stutter in his chest. I would like that. The next morning, William rode into Wallace to pick up supplies from the mercantile. He was loading bags of flour and sugar into his wagon when Sheriff Tom Brennan approached, his face serious. William got a moment. Sure, Tom. What is on your mind? The sheriff glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Had a telegram come through from Boston yesterday. Some fellow named Richard Sterling is looking for a young woman named Amelia Morrison. Claims she is his fiancé and she ran off with some of his money. He is offering a reward for information on her whereabouts. William felt his blood run cold. Is that so? Now, I do not know anything about any Amelia Morrison, Tom said carefully, his eyes shrewd. And even if I did, I would be mighty suspicious of any man who had to chase his fiancée halfway across the country. Women do not usually run unless they have good reason. I would imagine you are right about that. The thing is, Tom continued, Sterling sounds like he has connections and money. If he is determined to find this girl, he might send someone out here looking, might even come himself. Just thought you should know, in case you happen to run into anyone by that name. William met the sheriff's eyes and saw understanding there. I appreciate the warning, Tom. If I do happen to meet anyone in that situation, I will make sure they are protected. Figured you would, Tom said with a slight smile. You are a good man, William. Your father would be proud. The ride back to the ranch seemed to take forever, and William's mind raced with possibilities. He could send Amelia farther west, maybe to California where his sister lived. But the thought of her leaving, of not seeing her smile every morning, felt like a physical pain. Besides, running once had not solved the problem. What was to stop Richard from tracking her there too? No. Amelia was safer here on his ranch where he could protect her. But he needed to make sure she knew what was coming and let her decide how she wanted to handle it. He found her in the garden, picking tomatoes in the late morning sun. She looked up as he approached, and her smile faded when she saw his expression. What is wrong? William told her everything the sheriff had said, watching her face drain of color. When he finished, she sank down onto the garden bench, the basket of tomatoes forgotten at her feet. He is looking for me, she whispered. He is not going to let me go. He does not have any claim on you, William said firmly, sitting beside her. You are not his property. You have every right to be here. You do not understand. Richard always gets what he wants. His family has money, influence. He said I stole from him. That will make me a criminal. No one will believe my word against his. I believe you, William said. And so does Sheriff Brennan. He is on your side, Amelia. He made that clear. She looked up at him with those green eyes that had haunted his dreams. Why are you doing this? You could get in trouble for harboring me. Richard could make things very difficult for you. Let him try, William said. This is my land, my ranch. I do not care how much money or influence Richard Sterling has back in Boston. Out here, that does not mean a damn thing. And more importantly, I care about you, Amelia. I care about you far more than I probably should after only 2 weeks. But I do, and I am not going to let anyone take you somewhere you do not want to go. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and before William quite knew what was happening, she had thrown her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder. He held her carefully, gently, feeling the tremors that ran through her slight frame. "I care about you too," she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "I did not want to. I tried not to. But you have been so kind, so patient. You make me feel things I never felt with Richard, not even at the beginning when I thought I loved him." William pulled back just enough to look at her face, using his thumbs to wipe away her tears. "What kind of things? Safe, valued, like my opinions matter. Like I matter, not just as someone's possession, but as a person." She took a shaky breath. "And other things too. When you look at me, I feel warm all over. When you smile, I cannot help but smile back. When you are near, I feel like everything might actually be all right." "It will be," William promised. "We will figure this out together. But Amelia, I need you to know something. If Richard does come here, I will not force you to do anything you do not want to do. If you decide you want to leave, go somewhere else, I will help you. I will give you money, arrange for safe passage, whatever you need. But if you decide you want to stay, I will stand between you and anyone who tries to take you. The choice is always yours." She searched his face for a long moment, then leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When she pulled back, her eyes were still wet with tears, but she was smiling. "I want to stay," she said. "I want to stay here with you." William kissed her again, properly this time, cradling her face in his hands and pouring every ounce of feeling he had into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Then you will stay. And I promise you, Amelia Morrison, no one will ever make you afraid again." The weeks that followed were a strange mixture of happiness and tension. During the days, William and Amelia grew closer, learning each other's rhythms and habits. She taught him to cook simple meals and laughed at his clumsy attempts to help with the laundry. He taught her to ride, patiently showing her how to handle the gentle mare named Daisy until she could ride confidently around the ranch grounds. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and talk for hours, sharing stories from their pasts. William told her about his parents, about his father's dream of building a ranch that would last for generations, about his mother's fierce determination to create a civilized home in the wilderness. Amelia told him about growing up in Boston, about her love of books and music, about the dreams she had once had before Richard Sterling entered her life and shattered them. But underneath the happiness, there was always the awareness that Richard was looking for her. William took to keeping his rifle closer to hand, and made sure Pete knew to be on alert for any strangers asking questions in town. Sheriff Brennan stopped by regularly with updates so far. No one had shown up claiming to be Sterling or asking specifically about Amelia, but the reward offer was still standing. It was late October, nearly 2 months after Amelia's arrival, when things came to a head. William was working in the stable when Pete came running, his weathered face grave. "Boss, got trouble. 3 men just rode up, fancy types from back east by the looks of them. The one in front is asking for Miss Morrison." William felt his heart begin to pound, but he kept his voice calm. "Where is Amelia?" "In the house, making bread." "Good. Tell her to stay inside and bar the doors. And Pete, get my rifle from the house, then make yourself scarce. I do not want you getting mixed up in this. With all due respect, boss, go to hell. I have been on this ranch longer than you have been alive, and I am not running now." Pete's dark eyes flashed with determination. "Besides, 3 against 2 is better odds than 3 against 1. William gripped the old man's shoulder briefly in gratitude, then straightened his spine and walked out to meet the visitors. 3 men had indeed dismounted in front of the house. 2 were clearly hired muscle, big men with hard eyes and hands that rested too casually near their gun belts. But it was the third man who commanded attention. Richard Sterling was everything William had imagined and worse. Tall, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than most men in Wallace made in a year, with slicked-back dark hair and a handsome face that would have been pleasant if not for the cold cruelty in his eyes. He was perhaps 30 years old, and he looked at the ranch house the way a man might look at an insect he was about to crush beneath his boot. "You must be William Walker," Richard said, his Boston accent pronounced. "I am Richard Sterling. I believe you have something that belongs to me." "I have a lot of things, Mr. Sterling," William said evenly. "You will have to be more specific." "Do not play games with me, Cowboy. I know Amelia is here. The stage driver remembered her, and the shopkeeper in town mentioned that you had hired a young woman from back east. Now, I am a reasonable man. I am willing to overlook the fact that she stole from me and that you have been harboring a thief. Just produce Amelia and we can all avoid any unpleasantness." "Miss Morrison is not a thief, and she is not your property," William said, his voice hardening. "She is a free woman who made a choice to leave Boston. That is the end of the story." Richard's expression darkened. "I see she has been filling your head with lies. Amelia is my fiancé. We are to be married. She had some sort of nervous episode before the wedding and ran off, but I have come to bring her home where she belongs." "Funny thing about that," William said. "She tells a different story. She says you are a controlling bastard who threatened to lock her up after the wedding. She says she ran because she was afraid of what you would do to her. And you believe the word of a hysterical woman over mine." Richard's laugh was ugly. "I have proof of our engagement, proof that she took money from my accounts. What do you have?" "The word of some girl who probably spread her legs to earn her keep." William moved before he quite realized what he was doing, his fist connecting with Richard's jaw with a satisfying crack. The other man staggered back, and immediately his two hired men went for their guns. But Pete had emerged from the house with William's rifle, and the distinctive sound of it being cocked froze everyone in place. "I would not," Pete said calmly, the rifle trained on the closest gunman. "William is a decent shot, but I never miss." Richard straightened up, dabbing at his split lip with a handkerchief. His eyes had gone flat and dangerous. "You just assaulted me. I could have you arrested." "Go ahead and try," William said. "This is New Mexico territory, not Boston. And I am defending a woman under my protection from a man who came onto my property making threats." "Your protection?" Richard's eyes narrowed. "I see. You have been taking advantage of her vulnerability, making her dependent on you. Well, it does not matter. Amelia is legally my fiancée. We have a contract." "An engagement is not a contract," William said. "And even if it were, she broke it when she left. You have no legal claim on her." "Perhaps not," Richard agreed, his voice silky smooth now, "but I do have money and I have patience. I can make your life very difficult, Mr. Walker. I can tie you up in court for years, ruin your reputation, drive away your business. Or you can save us both a lot of trouble and convince Amelia to see reason. I am sure you could be very persuasive." "Get off my land," William said, his voice deadly quiet. "And do not come back. If I see you here again, I will not stop with one punch." Richard smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "You are making a mistake. I always get what I want, Mr. Walker, always. And I want Amelia." "Well, you cannot have her. Now go, before I let Pete shoot you for trespassing." For a long moment, Richard just stared at him, and William could see the calculations running behind those cold eyes. Then he nodded slowly and gestured to his men. "We will be at the hotel in town," he said as he mounted his horse. "I am sure Amelia will come to her senses once she realizes the trouble her stubbornness is causing. When she does, I will be waiting." They rode off in a cloud of dust, and William did not lower his guard until they were out of sight. Only then did he let out the breath he had been holding and turn to Pete. "Thank you for backing me up." "That is one evil son of a bitch," Pete said bluntly. "He is not going to give up easy." "I know." William headed for the house, where he could see Amelia's pale face in the window. "I know." She had the door open before he reached it, throwing herself into his arms hard enough to nearly knock him over. She was shaking like a leaf, and he could feel wetness seeping through his shirt from her tears. "I saw him," she whispered. "I saw Richard. Oh God, William, he found me. He actually found me." "I know, sweetheart, I know," William said, holding her tight and stroking her hair. "But he is gone now. I sent him away. He will not stay away. You do not know him like I do. He will find a way to make me go with him. He always wins. Always." William pulled back enough to look into her eyes, gripping her shoulders gently but firmly. "Listen to me, Amelia. I do not care how many times Richard Sterling won in Boston. This is not Boston, and I am not some society gentleman who will roll over when threatened. You are staying here because you want to, and he has no legal right to force you to do otherwise. But he said he could ruin you, take you to court. I cannot let you lose everything because of me." "You are not making me do anything," William said. "This is my choice, just like staying is yours, and I choose you, Amelia. I choose you over my reputation, over my peace of mind, over everything. Because somewhere in the last 2 months I fell in love with you, completely, utterly, head over heels in love, and I am not letting you go without a fight." She stared at him, fresh tears streaming down her face. "You love me." "I love you," he confirmed. "I love your strength, your courage, your kindness. I love the way you sing while you work and the way you laugh at my terrible jokes. I love the fierce determination in your eyes when you are kneading bread dough, like you are wrestling it into submission. I love everything about you, and I want you to stay, not as my housekeeper, but as my wife, if you will have me. William, She drew in a shuddering breath. "I love you too. I think I have loved you since that first day when you offered me safety without asking for anything in return. But I cannot marry you while Richard is still here, still making claims on me. It would not be fair to you." "Then we will deal with Richard first," William said. "Together. And then, when he is gone and you are free from his shadow, you can give me your answer." She nodded against his chest, and they stood there in the doorway for a long time, holding each other while the sun set behind the western hills. That night, Sheriff Brennan rode out to the ranch. William had sent word through Pete about Richard's arrival, and the lawman looked troubled. "This Sterling fellow has been making a lot of noise in town," Tom said, accepting the cup of coffee Amelia offered with a grateful nod. "Talking to everyone who will listen about his poor deluded fiancé, who was led astray by unscrupulous cowboys. He is throwing money around too, buying drinks, making friends. Can he actually do anything legally?" William asked. "That is the thing, not really. An engagement is not a marriage. Miss Morrison is a grown woman free to make her own choices. But he is claiming she stole money from him, and that is potentially criminal. He has papers that show withdrawals from his account that happened right before she left." "I took what was mine," Amelia said, her voice sharp. "My grandmother left me money in trust. Richard was managing it because my father thought it was improper for a woman to handle her own finances. I only took what belonged to me in the first place." "I believe you," Tom said, "but proving it might be difficult, and in the meantime, Sterling could make things mighty uncomfortable. He is already talking about filing charges, getting territorial judges involved." William set down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. "There has to be something we can do." "Well," Tom said slowly, "there is one thing that would make his claim on her completely invalid." "What is that?" "If Miss Morrison was married to someone else." A husband trumps a fiancé every time, legally speaking. And in the territory, there is no waiting period required. You can get married today if you want, as long as you have witnesses and someone authorized to perform the ceremony. Which, as it happens, I am. William looked at Amelia, and she looked back at him, and understanding passed between them. "That is not how I wanted to propose," William said softly. "I wanted to do it properly, with a ring and romance and everything you deserve." "I do not need any of that," Amelia said, and there was steel in her voice now, strength replacing the fear. "I just need you. I just need to be free from Richard Sterling once and for all. So yes, William Walker. Yes, I will marry you." They were married the next morning on the front porch of the ranch house, with Pete and Sheriff Brennan as witnesses, and the New Mexico sunrise painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Amelia wore the blue dress she had altered from his mother's trunk, and William wore his best shirt and the bolo tie his father had given him. They had no ring, but William tied a length of braided leather around her finger as a promise to get her a proper one as soon as he could get to Santa Fe. When Tom pronounced them husband and wife, William kissed his bride gently, reverently, and felt something settle into place in his soul. This was right. This was exactly where he was meant to be, with this woman in his arms and the rest of their lives stretching out before them. "Well," Tom said, signing the marriage certificate with a flourish, "I guess I better get back to town and file this with the territorial records. Should be official by this afternoon." "What do you think Richard will do when he finds out?" Amelia asked. "Honestly, I think he will be furious. But there is not a damn thing he can do about it. You are a married woman now, Mrs. Walker. His supposed claim on you is void, Mrs. Walker." Amelia smiled at the sound of it, and William felt his heart swell. She was his wife, his partner, his love, and no one would ever take her away. Richard Sterling did indeed react with fury when he learned of the marriage. He showed up at the ranch that afternoon with his 2 hired guns, his face red with rage. "You conniving little whore," he snarled at Amelia, who stood on the porch with William's arm around her waist. "You did this just to spite me." "I did this because I love my husband," Amelia said, and her voice did not shake. "And because I am free to marry whoever I choose. We are done, Richard. We were done the moment I got on that stage in Boston. Go home. I will not be humiliated like this." "I will." "You will do nothing," Sheriff Brennan said, stepping out from inside the house where he had been waiting. "Mrs. Walker is a married woman, which means your engagement to her is legally null and void. Any further harassment will result in charges being filed. Are we clear, Mr. Sterling?" Richard looked between them all, his hands clenched into fists. For a moment, William thought he might actually try something violent, but then the fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by cold calculation. "You have not heard the last of this," he said. "I will make sure everyone in Boston knows what kind of woman you really are, Amelia. Your family will be disgraced." "My family disgraced themselves when they tried to force me to marry you, despite knowing how you treated me," Amelia said. "I am finished trying to please them. I have a new family now." Richard stared at her for a long moment, then spat in the dust at her feet and stalked back to his horse. "You deserve each other. Let's see how you like living in this God-forsaken wasteland with this nobody cowboy when you could have had everything I offered." "I would rather have nothing with William than everything with you," Amelia said simply. They watched as Richard and his men rode away, this time heading in the direction of Santa Fe rather than Wallace. Tom stayed until they were out of sight, then tipped his hat to Amelia. "Congratulations, Mrs. Walker. I think you made the right choice." After the sheriff left, William and Amelia stood on the porch in the fading afternoon light. The last of the fear had finally left her eyes, replaced by something bright and fierce and alive. "It is really over," she said wonderingly. "He is really gone." "He is really gone," William confirmed. "You are free, Amelia, free to live your life however you want, free to be happy." She turned to him, sliding her arms around his neck. "I want to be happy with you. For the rest of my life. I want to wake up next to you and go to sleep in your arms and build something real and lasting here." "That sounds perfect to me," William said, and kissed her with all the love and passion he had been holding back, no longer restrained by propriety or fear or anything else. That night, they came together as husband and wife in the big bed that had belonged to William's parents, and Amelia learned what it meant to be touched with gentleness and desire instead of possession and control. William was patient and careful, showing her that intimacy could be beautiful rather than frightening, and when she fell asleep in his arms hours later, there was a smile on her face. The days turned to weeks, and the weeks turned to months. Winter came to New Mexico, bringing cold nights and the occasional dusting of snow that never lasted long under the bright sun. Amelia thrived in her new life, throwing herself into making the ranch house a true home. She planted flowers in the spring and vegetables in the summer. She learned to ride well enough to accompany William on trips to check the herds, sitting beside him on horseback and laughing at his stories. William had never been happier. Coming home each evening to find his wife waiting, seeing her smile light up when he walked through the door, sharing meals and conversation, and the thousand small intimacies of married life, it was everything he had never known he wanted. In August of 1879, exactly 1 year after Amelia had stepped off that stage coach with fear in her eyes, she told William she was expecting their first child. He spun her around in his arms, whooping with joy, and she laughed until tears streamed down her face. "Are you happy?" she asked when he finally set her down, his hands resting gently on her still flat belly. "Happy does not begin to cover it," William said. "You have given me everything, Amelia, purpose, joy, love, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." "I am the lucky one," she corrected. "You saved me, William. You replaced all my fear with light, and that light has never dimmed. Not for a single moment." Their son was born in April of 1880, a healthy boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. They named him Samuel, after William's father, and he was followed 2 years later by a daughter they called Rose, and then 2 years after that by another son, Thomas. The ranch prospered under William's careful management, growing from a modest operation to one of the most successful in the territory. Pete stayed on until his death in 1895, playing the role of beloved grandfather to all 3 children. Sheriff Brennan became a close family friend, often joining them for Sunday dinners and regaling the children with stories of the old days. In 1898, when New Mexico was still a territory but statehood was being seriously discussed, Amelia sat on the porch swing with William, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Rose had married a rancher from Santa Fe and had 3 children of her own. Samuel was running the ranch alongside his father, and Thomas was studying law in Denver. "You ever think about Boston?" William asked, his arm around his wife's shoulders. Amelia, now 41 but still beautiful to him, smiled and shook her head. "Only to be grateful I left. That life, those people, they were never really mine. This is my life. You are my life. This family, this land, this love we have built together, this is everything I never knew I could have. No regrets. Not a single one," she said firmly. "You gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me, William. You gave me myself. You showed me I was worth more than what Richard Sterling or my parents or Boston society said I was worth. You loved me when I was too afraid to love myself, and you replaced all that fear with light." a light that has never dimmed, not in 20 years. William kissed her temple, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender that had come to mean home to him. "I love you, Amelia Walker. I have loved you from the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach, looking lost and afraid. And I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "And I love you," she said, turning to kiss him properly. "Forever and always." They sat together as the sun set behind the western mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors, their grandchildren's laughter filling the air. The ranch stretched out around them, solid and enduring, built on the foundation of a love that had started with fear, but had grown into something unshakable. That night, lying in bed with William's arms around her, Amelia thought back to that terrified young woman who had arrived in Wallace with nothing but a carpet bag and a desperate hope for something better. She wished she could go back and tell that woman that everything would be all right, that she would find safety, love, purpose, and joy beyond measure, that the cowboy with the kind eyes would replace all her fear with a light that would sustain her through every day of the rest of her life. But perhaps that younger version of herself had known, somewhere deep down. Perhaps that was why she had trusted William that first day, why she had accepted his offer of help when every instinct screamed at her to trust no one. Perhaps she had recognized in him what Amelia knew now with absolute certainty, that William Walker was a man worth believing in, worth loving, worth building a life with. As she drifted off to sleep, safe and warm and loved, Amelia smiled. The fear was gone, replaced entirely by light. And that light, she knew, would never dim. The years continued to roll by like the seasons, each bringing its own joys and challenges. In 1901, Samuel married a schoolteacher from Santa Fe named Margaret, and they gave Amelia and William their first great-grandchild the following year. Thomas returned from Denver with his law degree and opened a practice in Santa Fe, occasionally taking cases in Wallace and the surrounding ranches. He married a rancher's daughter in 1903, and they settled on land adjacent to the Walker Ranch. Rose's oldest son showed an interest in ranching and started working alongside his Uncle Samuel and grandfather William when he turned 16. William, now in his late 40s, found immense satisfaction in teaching the next generation the skills his own father had taught him. The Walker Ranch had become a legacy, something that would outlive him and Amelia, and that knowledge brought him peace. In 1906, William and Amelia celebrated their 27th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together family and friends from across the territory. The ranch house, expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family, was filled with laughter and music. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, and as William looked around the crowded room, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. Sheriff Tom Brennan, now retired but still sharp as ever, raised a glass in toast. To William and Amelia Walker, who proved that love can bloom even in the harshest soil and that courage comes in many forms, may we all be so lucky. Everyone drank to that, and then Samuel stood up, clearing his throat. "I want to say something too. Most of you know that my mother came to Wallace under difficult circumstances. She was running from a man who wanted to control her, maybe even hurt her. My father gave her safety, yes, but more than that, he gave her respect and freedom and love. He showed her what a real partnership looked like. And that example has shaped how I treat my wife, how Thomas treats his, how our sons will treat their future wives. Pop, you did not just save Mom that day, you changed the course of our entire family. We are all better people because of what you built together." Amelia was crying openly now, and William had to clear his throat several times before he could speak. "Your mother saved me just as much as I saved her. Before she came, I was just going through the motions, working the ranch because it was what I knew but not really living. She taught me what it meant to have a partner, someone to share not just the work but the joy and the sorrow and everything in between. She brought light into my life, and I will be grateful for that every day I breathe. Later that night, after the last guests had left and the house was quiet, William and Amelia walked out to their favorite spot, a small rise behind the house that overlooked the ranch and the valley beyond. The moon was bright, illuminating the landscape in silver light. 27 years, Amelia mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I stepped off that stagecoach. Other times it feels like I have known you my entire life. I cannot imagine my life without you in it, William said. You have been my partner in every sense of the word. We built this ranch together, raised our children together, weathered every storm together. And we will continue to do so, Amelia said firmly, for as many years as we have left. They stood there holding hands, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. The fear that had once consumed Amelia was nothing but a distant memory, replaced entirely by the certainty of William's love and the life they had created together. In 1912, New Mexico finally achieved statehood. William, now 57, and Amelia, 55, celebrated along with everyone else in the territory. It felt like the culmination of something, a recognition that this wild land they had come to love was being acknowledged as a permanent part of the nation. You remember what New Mexico was like when I first arrived? Amelia asked as they watched the statehood celebration in Wallace. It felt so raw, so untamed. It still is in many ways, William said, but we have grown with it. We helped tame it without breaking its spirit. Like you did with me, Amelia said with a smile. You helped me heal without trying to change who I was. You never needed changing. You just needed the freedom to be yourself. As they grew older, William and Amelia gradually stepped back from the day-to-day running of the ranch, turning over more and more responsibility to Samuel and his sons. But they remained active and engaged, William still riding out to check on the herds well into his 60s. Amelia still tending her garden and cooking enormous meals for the family gatherings that happened at least once a month. In 1920, as they prepared to celebrate their 41st wedding anniversary, William began to feel his age. His joints ached more than they used to, and he moved a little slower. But his mind was sharp, and his love for Amelia had never wavered. If anything, it had deepened over the decades, evolving from the passionate romance of their early years into something richer and more complex. You know what I am most proud of? He asked Amelia one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset as they had done thousands of times before. What is that? That I kept my promise. I promised you that you would never have to be afraid again, that I would replace your fear with light that would never dim. And I did. We did it together. Amelia took his weathered hand in hers, both of them bearing the marks of a life well lived. You did more than that, my love. You gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams. You gave me children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. You gave me a home and a purpose, and a love that has sustained me through everything. The light you brought into my life has not only never dimmed, it has grown brighter with every passing year. I feel the same way, William said. Loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life. They sat together in comfortable silence. Two people who no longer needed words to communicate, who could understand each other with just a look or a touch. The sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, and when the stars began to appear, they were the same stars they had watched together for over 40 years. William lived to be 73 years old, passing peacefully in his sleep in 1926 with Amelia beside him, holding his hand just as she had held it through every important moment of their life together. His last words to her were simple but profound. "Thank you for saying yes." Amelia lived another 8 years without him, surrounded by the family they had created and the love they had built. She never remarried, telling anyone who asked that she had already experienced the love of a lifetime and did not need to search for it again. She spent her remaining years being a grandmother and great-grandmother, passing down stories of the early days of the ranch and of the cowboy who had saved a frightened young woman and given her everything. When Amelia Morrison Walker passed away in 1934 at the age of 77, she was buried beside William on the rise behind the ranch house, the spot where they had stood together so many times watching the sun set over the land they loved. Her tombstone bore a simple inscription that her children had chosen. She arrived with fear in her eyes. He replaced it with light that never dimmed. The Walker Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through Samuel's line and then his children's children. The house was expanded and modernized over the years, but the core of it remained the same, the solid adobe structure that William's father had built, and that William and Amelia had filled with love and laughter. And every Walker child who grew up on that ranch learned the story of their great-great-grandparents, the terrified young woman who fled across a country to escape a cruel man, and the cowboy who offered her not just safety but partnership and respect, and a love that lasted a lifetime. It became the family legend, the foundation story that shaped how each generation understood what love and marriage should look like. In 1978, on the 100th anniversary of Amelia's arrival in Wallace, the family held a reunion at the ranch. Over 200 descendants of William and Amelia Walker gathered to celebrate the legacy of two people who had met by chance and built something extraordinary through choice and commitment and unwavering love. The oldest living descendant, Samuel's daughter Marie, who was 93, gave a speech about her grandparents. "I remember them both clearly," she said, her voice still strong despite her age. "What I remember most was how they looked at each other. Even when they were old, even after decades of marriage, Grandpa would look at Grandma like she was the most precious thing in the world, and Grandma would light up whenever he walked into a room. That is what love looks like. That is what they gave to all of us, the example of what a true partnership can be." The ranch still stands today, though it has changed hands outside the family now. But the story of William and Amelia Walker lives on in the town of Wallace, in the historical records of New Mexico, and in the hearts of their descendants scattered across the country. It is a story of courage and love, of fear transformed into light, of two people who found each other against all odds and created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blows across the New Mexico plains, and the sun sets in that particular way that turns the sky into a canvas of impossible colors, some say you can still feel their presence on that little rise behind the old ranch house, two souls standing together, watching the stars emerge, bound by a love that death itself could not diminish. William Walker had been just a cowboy working his father's ranch, going through the motions of life without understanding what he was missing. Amelia Morrison had been a terrified young woman fleeing from darkness with no idea where she was going or what she would find. But fate, or luck, or perhaps something greater brought them together on that August day in 1878 in Wallace, New Mexico Territory. He saw her fear and made it his mission to replace it with something better. She saw his kindness and chose to trust it despite every reason not to. Together, they built a love story that would inspire generations, proving that sometimes the most profound connections come from the most unlikely circumstances. The fear in Amelia's eyes when she first arrived was real and deep, and completely justified given what she had experienced. But William Walker, with his steady presence and unwavering support, replaced that fear with a light born of love and respect and partnership. And that light, burning bright in both their hearts, never dimmed, not through the challenges they faced, not through the passing years, not even through death itself. It remained a beacon for their children and their children's children, a reminder that love at its best is not about possession or control, but about two people choosing each other every day and building something greater together than either could have created alone. That was the legacy of William and Amelia Walker, not just the ranch or the family they created, but the enduring example of what love could be when it was rooted in mutual respect, trust, and an unwavering commitment to stand together against whatever the world might bring. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not the wealth they accumulated or the land they owned, but the love they shared and the light that never dimmed, burning bright from that first moment on a dusty street in Wallace, until long after they had both passed into memory and legend. Their story became part of the land itself, woven into the history of New Mexico as surely as the rivers and mountains. Every old-timer in Wallace knew the tale, and they told it to their children and grandchildren, the story of the frightened woman and the cowboy who loved her, who built an empire of love on the foundation of a single act of kindness. And so the light continued to shine, passed down through the generations, a testament to the transformative power of love and the strength it takes to choose trust over fear, hope over despair, and love over everything else.